Hi, welcome to my channel. This video is all about bad food, specifically bad food that you would have eaten in chain restaurants in the 80s and the early 90s. Now I'm not going to pretend that my list is comprehensive, but do keep watching because I think I've saved 3 genuinely awful choices until last. I made this video because it occurred to me that I'm in my late 40s, and when I talk to people in their 20s and 30s, they have no idea just how awful eating out was in that era. I mean, these days, if you go out, it's quite hard to have a really bad meal. You might think, oh, well, what if you go to a Wetherspoons? But to be honest, the food there is going to be pretty good by the standards of the garbage that was served in some of these places in the 80s and the early 90s. You have to remember, back then, there were no Google reviews, there was no TripAdvisor, so there was no real punishment for bad or lazy restaurants. Also, at home, British cooking was really bad. This was a period before Nigella Lawson and Jamie Oliver. We'd just sort of forgotten how to cook. Everything was really overboiled, and if it wasn't homemade food, it would be really horrible processed food. I mean, I know there's the big thing these days about ultra processed food, but at least it actually tastes nice. Back then, we sort of hadn't figured out the technology, and people would eat things like Findus crispy pancakes. Perhaps that advert has brought back fond memories. It doesn't for me. They were discontinued and then inexplicably brought back in 2019 like some sort of weird virus or one of the kind of slashers emerging from the lake in a horror film. So the thing is, restaurants didn't have much competition. I mean, just to give you an example, I grew up in Islington for the first part of my life, and on Upper Street there were only 3 restaurants. One of them was the Sultan's Delight, was actually very good. These days, I think there's more than 100 restaurants just on that one street. So what I've focused on here is mostly just chain restaurants, because I figure, they can take the punishment, and also they kind of represent a particularly kind of lazy, can't be bothered attitude towards customer service that kind of embodies the kind of hospitality trade in the 80s and the early 90s. Some of you are going to disagree with some of my choices. That's fine. Do let me know in the comments. I can't pretend that I've created some sort of complete comprehensive list. It's just a bit of fun. Let's look at the first bad food option. I've picked Beefeater Inns. Now, they were created by Whitbread breweries as a sort of response to the Burn Inn, like a steakhouse chain. Now, some of you might turn around and say, well, actually, Beefeater's all right. I've eaten at them. Food is not good in my opinion. And let's take a look at this advert for Beefeater restaurants starring Geoffrey Palmer. It's from 1984.
I don't need to look at that. Steak, isn't it? Fair enough. I'll have a nice medium rump.
I'll have the place.
You're out of luck, old thing. This is a Beefeater. B-E-E-F, beef. Moo. Get the idea? She's been overdoing it.
Place, madam.
I'll say this, they know what they're doing in the kitchen. How's your steak?
Delicious.
Beefeater Steakhouse is great steak and no mistake, even when it's fish.
There you can see that neatly embodies the kind of eating experience from the 1980s. You've got the sort of mild misogyny, a sort of strange passive-aggressive attitude to the whole eating experience. Like you should be grateful for whatever they gave you. The other curious thing about that advert is they had a lot of time to make it and shoot it, I assume, and you'd kind of want the food to look good. But it doesn't. It just looks like school food. Now, maybe you had a good experience in a Beefeater restaurant. I gather there's still a few around, but generally I think I ate there a couple of times. It was bad. It was like kind of school dinners. It was a bit like motorway service station food. Not good, in my opinion. I mean, the only thing it had going for it is that it was cheap, and that was another consideration in those days. Not about the quality of the food, it was more about the amount of food on your plate, which is very much like an experience if you, say, go to a restaurant in Wales. It's more like, can they cover the plate with an enormous amount of food, not does it taste any good. So my next pick for a bad food experience is Wimpy. It's controversial. I know some of you are going to say, what's wrong with Wimpy? And if I pull the menu up here, I know there's going to be people of a certain age who go all misty-eyed, oh, the Knickerbocker Glory, the Brown Derby, whatever it is. And in fact, I'm being a bit of a hypocrite here because I've got very fond memories of going to a Wimpy just off the Caledonian Road. Every week I'd go for swimming lessons for about an hour. I'd have to do that thing where you had to put on your pyjamas and then go and rescue a brick that was at the bottom of the deep end. The brick was drowning. You had to get the brick after swimming through like a big hula hoop that was on the bottom of the pool. And then after doing all of this, then I was rewarded by getting taken to the Wimpy to have a cheeseburger and a chocolate milkshake. I wasn't taken by my parents because they were modern parents. I was brought up by third parties, like au pairs and nannies. Yeah, that was the kind of childhood I had. Please feel free to judge me. I can remember going to the Wimpy and having this cheeseburger, and there was a chocolate milkshake, and it had like condensation on the outside. So why have I included Wimpy as a bad food experience? Well, because I know that my palate as an 8-year-old child wasn't very good, and objectively they can't have been very good, because as soon as McDonald's came along, they were put out of business. You look at this Wimpy ad here. Yeah, okay, the food kind of looks good, but McDonald's wiped the floor with them. The thing about McDonald's was it was bright. It seemed like exciting. The very first McDonald's opened on the Seven Sisters Road, which was right at the end of where I lived, on Downwood Road, just in Islington. And that was like it's hard to explain now, because I know McDonald's doesn't have that reputation, but it was genuinely like modernity. And back in the 80s, you eat a sort of calf, you had a burger, there was a chance you get food poisoning. That would never happen at a McDonald's. Parents loved it because all the kids wanted to take their friends there for like birthday parties, so it was a really cheap option. And also, in those days, people hadn't realised that junk food was really bad for you. So, and also they didn't have like the super size thing, so it was just like an occasional treat. And then when McDonald's came along, it just sort of wiped the floor with Wimpy's and put them out of business, mostly. Or they were rebranded as Burger King. So I would say they do make the cut as a bad food experience. The next bad food experience, I picked one example, the Old Orleans, right? Now this was like a fake southern dining experience, but there were like a whole set of like cheesy fake Americana restaurants. Most of them have gone bust now. I think the last TGI Fridays closed in central London, and they all marketed the same sort of basic experience. It'd be like ribs, buttermilk chicken, that kind of thing. But the thing about them was that the food was terrible. I mean, these days, if you go and have like a fried chicken, or you have a sort of a diner style experience, it'll be pretty good. Back then, literally everything tasted like it had come out of a packet, and it almost certainly had. And you could almost hear the ping of the microwave as your food was brought to your table. I've genuinely no idea why these places did well. If I put the menu up here, maybe it was because the food was cheap, but to be fair, that menu was probably something from the late 80s, early 90s, and that's compound inflation for you. Yes, you could have a main course for £5, not 45. So I picked on Old Orleans. They've all since shut, but I could have picked any of them, like, Benny and Frankie's, this is Garfunkel's. It's all basically the same American garbage. Now, my next choice, I think, will unite you on this. We're into the sort of the last three, the best of the worst, or the worst of the best. This one, there's only like one of them left. It was a chain called Spud U Like. An advert here.
At a Spud U Like restaurant, there's something for everyone. A tasty baked potato with a choice of delicious fillings. Sausage and beans, chili con carne, chicken curry, cottage cheese, sour cream.
As you can see, their selling point was they sold baked potatoes with various toppings. You think, ooh, that sounds delicious. If you're a Brit, you go, ooh, I wonder if they do baked beans. The answer is, yes, they did. By the way, to any non-Brits, no one really fully understands why we're so obsessed with baked beans. I mean, I think they are the food of the gods. The rest of the world thinks we're crazy. But there you go. So look, what they were doing was very, very simple. Baked potatoes. And believe it or not, they couldn't do it. So their tagline was Spud U Like. Spud meaning potato, you like, no you didn't. There was one on the Finchley Road. I think I ate there 2 or 3 times. It was terrible. Now the last two bad food options for eating out, they're both based in railway stations. And you're probably thinking, oh, is he going to go on about British Rail sandwiches? Which is a bit of a cliche. Now in fairness, British Rail sandwiches were absolutely awful. Here's an advert. You apparently could have a packed lunch on a British Rail train. Quite a homoerotic advert, and to be honest, that's the most positive thing I can say about it. Yeah, I remember eating British Rail sandwiches because I was a bit of a nerd. I used to go train spotting with my dad, and he'd sometimes buy me a sandwich. I don't know whether that was meant to be a treat or punishment. I remember eating a prawn sandwich once, and that was a genuinely traumatic experience. I survived, So coming in at number 2 is Pointers. This was a fast food chain which I think only really existed at British Rail stations. I went there, the one in Euston, quite a bit because my au pair was dating someone who worked there. Again, you know, feel free to judge me. Yeah, that was my life. But I can remember this place. The food was diabolical. Now, British Rail was a byword for terrible food. These days, you go to a train station, there's loads of good options. Well, apart from upper crust, that's terrible, and Delicious France, but basically all pretty good. And you can always just go to M&S or whatever. There's decent food options at most major stations. Not back then. They did allow a little bit of capitalism, so there was like newsagents, and there was also, you could go to a place called Tie Rack. So that was a thing very much in the 80s, where you could buy kind of nasty patterned ties, or sock shop, where you could buy nasty socks. I don't know why that was a thing back then. Sort of people buy them as amusing gifts, which in the sense that people go, oh, those are funny, you bought me Garfield socks, and then never wear them. Or if you did, they fell apart because the quality was absolutely terrible. Pleasingly, Sock Shop I think no longer exists. Good riddance. Pointers doesn't either because it's a terrible place to eat. They had like these packets where they had the food in it, and then they just put it in a microwave. They didn't even hide the fact that they were putting it in a microwave. They were just lined up in a cabinet, you'd pick one, and they just put it in a microwave. And it would be things like sausage rolls, and they were absolutely awful. And let me just say, I know like things like Greggs gets a bad rep. You know, you eat there, the food basically tastes all right, okay? Pointers did not. It was absolutely horrible. But it was not the worst. The worst, the absolute worst, in my opinion, was a British Rail food concession. It was British Rail hamburgers. They were made under the brand name Casey Jones. It's hard to describe just how bad they were. I think I had them because I used to go to train stations because I was a train nerd. I had a few of them and they were all awful. You can imagine the post office trying to make hamburgers. That's what you should think. Because, I mean, back in those days, British Rail, it was kind of state run and people said, oh, it's good. It wasn't. Most things were pretty dirty, the trains were very shabby, and they definitely could not make hamburgers. They tasted like they'd just been dropped on the tracks and picked up. Just awful. I'm saying greasy in a bad way. I don't understand how they managed to make them so bad. And I think post-privatisation, not surprisingly, they got rid of them, and obviously now you just go to McDonald's or Burger King or whatever, any of the many options you have at stations. Well, that's it. I can't pretend that this was a full list. I just hope it was a bit of fun, kind of like a trip down memory lane, or perhaps a trip into a sort of memory dungeon or a basement. Maybe some people go, oh, actually, I really like Casey Jones burgers. I can say with confidence, nobody is going to do that. Wimpy, maybe. I mean, I did have a good Wimpy experience a few years ago. There's one in Shadwell. It's got rebranded with the South African version of Wimpy, and I had a very nice bacon sandwich. So I've sort of contradicted myself there. But, you know, thanks. If you've enjoyed watching it so far, you know, please give the channel a like and, you know, do subscribe. And if you haven't enjoyed it, well, you know, thanks for sticking around so long. And I hope to see you on the next video. Bye-bye.